right, welcome. It is episode 211 of the Comic Walters, and returning once again, somebody who by this point needs no introduction, Mark Russell. So let me just bring him in, and we'll see if we can upvote or downvote this episode. How's it going, Mark?
It's going well. I think the reference might be lost on some people as of yet, but we'll
I,
move up to
I,
speed.
yeah, but so before we get into that, how you been? What have you been up to? What's new?
Well, I'm pretty much just always working, which is, the way I like it. It's the problem I've always wanted to have. So I'm usually just writing when people ask me what I've been doing. But it's been fun. I'm doing some traveling in the summer, and so I don't know. I'm just having a good time generally.
Back to that traveling thing, huh?
Yeah, I never have good answers to that question. What have you been up to? And I have to ask myself that. What have I been up to? Oh my God, I've just been sitting in this chair for like 3 months.
Well, as we've kind of alluded to, and if people saw the you know stuff out on our Twitter feed, you have a new book coming out from AWA, um, Death Ratio. Why don't you kind of? I think it comes out into May. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I forget the
Okay.
exact date, like May 26th, May 28th, somewhere in there.
So without spoiling it too much, kind of give us, an idea of what the book is about, because it is just a single one shot, correct?
That's right. And it's a long one. I think it's 40, 48 pages somewhere in there. But it's about a man who wakes up from a coma 23 years in the future to find that like social media has basically replaced the government, that everything is run by social media. It's the only justice system there is. And the way it works is that everybody's got like an exploding neck bracelet around their neck. And if you get too many, and you can give somebody a like or a dislike. And if your dislikes outnumber your likes by too much, the neck bracelet explodes and you're gone. So the idea is that this will police people's behavior, so you don't need courts or the police or governments or anything. Everyone will do the right thing because for the simple fact they don't want their head to explode.
So how did you pitch that to AWA?
Yeah, I don't know. AWA seems to really, the worse the pitch is, the more AWA seems attracted to it. They like the pitches that like everybody else is like, this is just too nutty for us. But I think that's sort of the secret with them. It's like the more daring and sort of uh, weirdo, sort of gonzo science fiction he is, the more they seem to like it.
And so there's, as it is a one shot, tell us a little bit about the main character of the book, because he seems to, since it is kind of it is a self-contained story. You seem to focus on, the focus is on him, and there's not really any
Yeah.
other subplots running throughout.
Well, it focuses on a guy named Arnold Lane, who was an MIT grad student when he got a hold of some bad appetizers at a restaurant and fell into a coma and woke up to find the world radically different. In some ways, it's much more utopian. There's all these futuristic buildings, things are more automated. People are very nice to him on a very superficial level. But the one thing that sort of turns this utopia into a dystopia is that your head can pop off at any moment if your death ratio gets activated. So it's really about him trying to navigate this world without his head exploding. He had when he went into the coma, he had a fiance and he had a brother, and his fiance was killed during the social media wars that happened shortly after he went under, and he doesn't know where his brother is. So it's really a story of postmodern alienation. Before everybody decides they don't want to read this, it's also sort of a funny satire. It's sort of like, I think, along the same lines as maybe uh, Sleepers or like They Live or something. It's sort of a futuristic satire of the present.
Okay, because I was going to say, what besides the current state of social media, what were kind of the inspirations behind the book?
Yeah, I sort of preempted that question a little bit, but yeah, I think that largely it's using science fiction as a metaphor, which all the best science fiction does. I think is the science fiction I gravitate towards, like something that wants to talk about the present, but people are still sort of defensive or don't want to hear you if you're criticizing something that's part of them. So you set it on another planet, or you set it in the future, or you exacerbate it so that it becomes glaringly obvious to them what's wrong with it, and they don't feel defensive about it. They don't feel attacked when you talk about social media in the future the way they would if you talked about their social media usage in the present.
So, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you've read, not everything, is spread out over 5 issues. Is there a different way you have to approach, writing a self-contained one-shot story?
Yeah, and it's actually nice because you could trust the reader a little more. You don't have to have these cliffhangers. You don't have to have sort of these panels where you're sort of catching people up on the story to date. You could just sort of tell the story and just trust them to follow along over the course of one issue. It also, really allows you, this format allows you to tell stories that were maybe not enough story for a series, but too much story for an issue. So all these things that sort of felt I was never able to sort of write because either they were too long for a single issue or too short for a series. Now suddenly there's a format for them, which is great.
Mhm. Now, this isn't the first time that you've incorporated social media into, your writing. I mean, your Prez run was very heavily social media kind of based and influenced. Um, how was there? I mean, and there are very different takes on the use of social media. How how did you go about kind of steering away from what you did in Prez to this?
Well, Prez was 10 years ago, so if anything, I wasn't pessimistic enough yet. I feel like in a lot of ways my knowledge of the dangers, or at least my fears of the dangers of social media, have grown more acute and better informed. So it really is about the danger of a collective consciousness and what that would do to human beings. Sort of like it's sort of the junk food of society, in the same way that, like, ho-hos or ding dongs, we never really evolved to eat sugar that refined, or to eat cake, or things like that, and so they're terrible for us. I think in the same way we evolved to be social creatures, but we evolved to be social creatures to deal with people in small groups, or like clans or little tribes. We did not evolve to deal with billions of people online anonymously. And so I think that in a lot of ways, social media is the ding dong of, human interactions. It's something which is very attractive. We all enjoy it, but God, this is terrible for us.
So how much research inside just your regular social media presence did you kind of go into for the background for the book?
Not much, because it's mostly just my opinions I've had
Hmm.
for a long time, things that are percolated, embedded in a story about a guy who feels very much like I did when social media started taking over, like a guy who had grown up in the pre-internet age and just felt like, I don't recognize the world anymore. I don't understand. I think for me, a lot of it kind of was driven home when when Second Coming was announced with Vertigo, when I published that, and then there was this sort of online uproar, and this with it, and nobody had read a page of this comic yet, and yet there was this furor over it, and an online petition that got like 250,000 signatures, each one of which, auto sent an angry email to Dan DiDio's inbox at DC. And I had never even imagined anything like this happening before. How is this even possible? And at the time, it's very, you feel like you're under siege. You feel like there's 1,000 angry villagers with pitchforks and torches at your door, knocking down your house. But in reality, it's not like that at all. It just feels like that because you see them all in aggregation. In reality, it's like, one old lady in Krakow, Poland, who took 1.5 seconds to click a button online for going on to something else. Somebody else, in South America, seeing the same forum and thinking, well, that's bad. I don't like blasphemy, and clicking a button. And it really is the lowest form of commitment whatsoever to sort of dogpile somebody on social media, because you just do it and you forget about it. But to the person being dogpiled, especially over something that I haven't even said yet, uh, it felt like, oh my God, I've waded into a zombie horde, which in a lot of ways I had, because nobody was really thinking about what they were doing. But to me, it
Hmm.
sort of brought home the collective dangers of a mass consciousness like that, where the reason why they start these campaigns is to sort of um, enforce conformity without anybody really believing in what you are being forced to conform to. You're forced to do it just by fear of this easily assembled mob that maybe doesn't even think of itself as a mob, because it just thinks of itself as like, the old lady in Krakow, or the random guy in South America who sees something and clicks on a button to get it off his screen. Uh, but to the person being targeted, it feels very much like like an avalanche of you know um, opprobrium. And so I think that that's the danger of social media, is it warps our consciousness so that we start trying to preempt criticisms that may not even exist, or that, if they exist, are engineered and not really reflective of people's opinions. It's like on Twitter, they're there was a shorthand for this called why do you hate waffles? Where if you could say something on Twitter like, I like pancakes, and somebody would be like, well, why do you hate waffles? So you begin thinking as you're tweeting, I want to say that I like pancakes, but I don't want the waffle people mad at me. So I have to sort of like introduce this fine print. Everyone becomes like a little lawyer trying to preempt this criticism, which really doesn't mean anything. And so it has this sort of ruinous effect on spontaneity and genuine expression. And I think, not just in terms of like forcing people to sort of preempt criticism of themselves, to say something that's maybe not as directly what they feel, but also the people who it hasn't really worked in making people more polite or any nicer, because the people who want to be jerks are now able to be even jerkier, even worse, and more toxic and more abusive on social media, because online, because of social media, because they are able to find, run with these little packs of wolves, these little troll farms of like fellow travelers. They feel like they can get away with anything because they've got like 1,000 people who will, gang up with them. Like, you probably would not have had a large anti-vax movement like you do now before social media. But now anybody can go on, to like the head of the CDC and tell them that they're selling poison, because they know that 1,000 other anti-vaxxers will join. So to the person who's the head of the CDC, it feels like, oh, the villagers are at my gates with pitchforks. And I'm actually, by saying, vaccines are real, vaccines work, I'm actually saying something really unpopular. Whereas most people aren't crazy, know that vaccines are effective and vaccines work.
Right.
It's just that you have this highly motivated minority that makes themselves feel like a majority because they all pile on at once.
And I think you kind of, not to give too much away about the book, but I think you kind of capture the different types of groups that are out there in social media in the book. And when the guy has the option of joining one of them, where there, certain other groups that you maybe you wanted to, I don't know, include, but just because of your confined page count that you couldn't
Yeah, it's I mean,
include them.
granted, like all sort of satire, right? It's an oversimplification. But you sort of like have to choose these things to represent the phenomenon itself, rather than all, being a comprehensive breakdown of all the different sort of groups that form on social media. But I think that in a lot of ways he represents kind of what the most of us are, which is just like, I just want to like post about my love of pancakes. I just want to I just want to talk about, my dog. I don't really want to join a group. I don't want to be part of one of these like wolf packs. And the people who are drawn to the wolf packs are the ones you have to worry about.
So tell us a little bit about the rest of your team on the book, your artist and colorist and letterer and.
Well, Lacey is the artist, and I think and I forgot the name of the colorist, so I'm sorry. My apologies in advance. But I think that they really teamed up to thread the needle very well between something that looks both sort of attractive and futuristic, and yet also dystopian. Because I think part of the problem with dystopian fiction is that it looks so dystopian. You know, it's like dour and gray. It looks like a set from the old Max Headroom TV show, or from like East Germany or something. And so nobody recognizes that they're living in a dystopia because it doesn't look like that. And I think to show dystopia as it actually would exist in this country and in most of the world now, you'd make it sort of colorful and attractive. There'd be big jumbotrons, and there'd be you know advertisements, and there would be people jogging in the park. It wouldn't look like a dystopia. And in fact, to the people living in this world, it's not a dystopia. This is just what they've always known. It's only when somebody's been in a coma and they wake up and they weren't used to this, they realize just what a nightmare this is. Everyone else is sort of a boiled frog, as it were. They just sort of like have changed the world slowly until they don't realize that it's unusual, or maybe not a great thing, that your head could blow off of your neck at any point if you anger too many people on social media.
I think you kind of, just from the get go, you kind of, I felt like, I know you've run a Kickstarter before. I felt like you kind of got a little nice little jab in there about crowdfunding is great. And well, if
Yeah.
we have time, we'll talk about the Northwest Cartoon Museum. But
Oh, good.
I like how within the first page after the guy wakes up in the coma, he's like, "How am I going to pay for this?" And they're like, "Oh, don't worry about it, but you have to send
Yeah.
some stuff out."
And again, that's sort of like how this is in some ways kind of a utopia, because he doesn't have like these enormous hospitals. He doesn't have the things that we today would worry about. He's just got one very big problem to worry about, and that's like his head exploding. Yeah. Slavoj Žižek said this thing about Jaws, because Jaws was sort of like the first blockbuster, first huge, like runaway mega hit. And he said the reason why he thought Jaws was this runaway mega hit, because it was made in the mid 1970s, when the fabric of traditional society seemed to be falling apart. Everyone was, hippie, or a feminist, or a counterculture, rock star. It was, so it felt like to old people, or to people who grew up in a more traditional society, that there was a generation gap, that they didn't understand the world anymore, and that there was 100 other problems for them to worry about. There was 100 problems, and that Jaws, what it did was it allowed everyone to sort of focus on one problem, and it's a big shark. And so, it was sort of why people were hit. It's like, oh, it's a simpler time when all you had to worry about was being eaten by a shark. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what this is. It's a story about like a simpler time in the future where all you have to worry about is exploding.
So, are you worried about being banned from a certain restaurant because of this book?
Like, oh, yeah, I don't, possibly. I don't know. I don't really go there, so it's sort of toothless lion. But yeah, possibly. And that's kind of the fun thing about going with AWA, is that like a lot of companies be like, oh, you got to come up with a fictional version, and it's like they're
Mhm.
just like, whatever.
I was like, I had to look at that a second because I wondered. I thought it's like I couldn't have just read that as the actual restaurant. Not
Well, it's so unfair of me too, because I never eat there, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just am picking on somebody. I'm the meanie. I'm the guy who should be downvoted. I'm the guy who should get a dislike for that.
I think there's a lot of people that would give you enough vote for that. so, now where the book is, I mean, where the book stops or ends, it's kind of, oh, I mean, it's open if you want to tell more story because there's definitely something there to give, not to give away the book, but is it possibly something that you would want to return to if it does well?
It's possible. I mean, I did leave it open, and I think that if there was a sequel, it would follow that character, but it would be very different because it wouldn't be about social media at all. It would be about a world sort of like after it would be like a world where we are trying to reconstruct society, in this sort of human engineered nature. So it'd be more about like bioengineering and more about like um, about alternatives to our current civilization now that it's seems to be circling the drain.
And I will, again, not to give anything away, but I there was one part in there where I actually had to go back earlier in the book to make sure that I was seeing the correct thing or this correct um, person. So that I would. It's definitely one that you kind of want to go back and look through and um, look at like I thought it was kind of cool how you'd have like them like, oh, my clothes are an advertisement. Don't worry, once upgrade, you can upgrade to
Yeah,
nothing.
you get sponsor free clothing until you can afford like sponsor. They'll get it's sort of like the double edged sword of this future society. It's like, oh, you don't have any clothes, you don't have any money. That's no problem. We'll give you clothes, but there's gonna be like these digital advertisements for boner pills or whatever on your clothes until you can afford to like get rid of the advertisements.
Was it how was it writing the main character? Because he kind of goes through a period where he recluses himself because he's close to that threshold.
Yeah, no, I feel like very close to the main character because I think in a lot of ways he expresses a lot of my own sort of bewilderment at in a lot of ways I'm just an old man yelling at a cloud, and I feel like he's kind of like finds himself in that situation. But sometimes there's a good reason to yell at a cloud.
So, what would want people who read this to kind of take away from it?
I think I would want them to reevaluate the role that social media plays, not only in their lives, because I think that's sort of the easy part. It's, well, maybe I should cut back on social media, but also just the role that these sort of aggregated forms of consciousness, be it social media or quote unquote AI, the what they are going to be doing to human consciousness, because
Mhm.
we cannot afford to be a frog in the boiling water. Because by the time it's obvious how these are destroying human consciousness or our ability to think critically, it'll be too late because they're too powerful an engine of disinformation or mediocritization for us to really wait for that to become a problem to do anything about. And I think this is one of the problems inherent with our technological digital civilization is that we were used to we evolved to deal with problems on a generational basis where it's like, well, if there's a drought or something, there's time to deal with it, or if there's time to deal with changing climate, or there's time to deal with Vikings because the raids happen once a year or something. With social media and AI and these other sorts of digital realities, it's like it's coming so quickly and it's changing so fast. The problem's adapting quicker than we can. We really can't afford to be behind the ball. We can't afford to like, take these long times to adapt to these civilizational threats that we used to take, because it'll be too late.
Now, was there when you were writing it, did you kind of come up with something, but kind of go, I better hold back on that because that might be pushing things a little too far, or push the wrong button, or kind of.
Not really. I mean, maybe I should do that more, but I don't know. I feel like my impulse is like if I'm putting something in there that's a little aggressive or a little pushing the envelope, it's because I feel strongly about it. And I feel like as a writer, that's really my mission, is to like write about the things I feel strongly about, and not
Mhm.
be some bullshitty sort of ballet dancer who's trying to make everyone happy, but or trying to like be just sort of dazzle people, but to actually like talk about the things that I want to talk about, the things I think are important. And I think if you really believe in the point you're making, or you really are sort of talking about something that matters to you, it's kind of hard to be too, to be too loud about it.
Mhm. I know that's kind of the hallmark of your writing, and what I really enjoy because I mean
A lack of
it
subtlety.
was well,
Well,
I mean,
I'll own that.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
subtlety for losers.
but I mean, like I think for this one, it was for me for compared to the other stuff, it was very on the nose. I mean, Flintstones was great because, but it, kind of had that kind of humor that offset it, kind of, and then um, all your other stuff. I mean, I don't know if I'm conveying this point clearly, but it just it was. I mean, it was kind of darker than I kind of expected from you. I mean, not all robots was kind of dark, but this was
Yeah, this
dark.
is probably more pessimistic, I think, than probably Not All Robots, for the simple fact that I think we're a lot closer to this reality than we are to the reality in Not All Robots, even though they deal with similar issues of automation and replacing human lives with synthetic facsimiles of human lives. I think that this one is probably, we may already be past the threshold on this one. We might already be too late to put the genie back in the bottle on social media and the threats that digital forms of mass consciousness pose to our species and to our ability to withstand groupthink and think about problems critically.
Was there anything else you kind of wanted to mention about the book um, that you think
It's
people
just,
should
I
know?
think we touched on this earlier. It's just above and beyond like the sort of my writing and the satire factor. I think it's just a beautiful book to look at. I mean, Lacey just really knocked it out of the park with the artwork, and I found myself just looking at the pages, just like even before the lettering was put in. It's like, wow, this is just, even if there were no words on this page, I would just love looking at this page. And he did so great with the facial expressions, because everyone seems kind of like, blithely happy to be in this world, except for Arnold, who's like terrified in every panel. And it's a great juxtaposition.
Yep. So, well, am I correct that Traveling to Mars just wrapped with issue 11?
That's correct. Yes. Chapter 11 was the final chapter. And so now, if you've missed out on the series, please contact your local comic shop and let them know that you want the trade, because the trade will be coming out soon. In fact, I think the final order cutoff for the trade is April 8th. So call them tomorrow and let them know you want the trade. I honestly feel like this is maybe the best thing I've ever written, Traveling to Mars.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm a couple issues behind just because of life, but it's it is a very it is a very very deep, very prolific series, and I bet that you're kind of glad for it to be out in the world and ready to move on to the next project, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of writing in comics is that you're always working on the next project, even before the previous one is done. It's like very few people can afford to just be working on one project at once. I have to do multiple projects at once, which is the way I like it, because I like having multiple things going. So if I get painted into a corner on one project, or I'm just sort of sick of writing it, there's something else for me to move on to and keep myself active. But yeah, you're always having to like be moving on to the next thing. But what I really don't want to do is to just act like, an insect giving birth to 1,000 eggs, and then once I've given birth to them, who cares what happens to them? Because I really do care about what happens to these books. I really do. I'm really invested in not only having written Traveling to Mars, but wanting people to read it. It's very important to me people read it, because I think I think it will be therapeutic for some people the way it was therapeutic for me to write it, about like my own sort of angst and fears about my own mortality. Maybe you will find some commonality in that, and we won't be so alone in the universe after that. And also, I just feel like it's probably about as good as I can do, and so I don't want it to be wasted.
Speaking of other projects, Batman: The Dark Age also the first issue came out, which is kind of I don't know if it's exactly a follow up, but in the same vein as Superman: The Space Age. Can you talk a little bit about you know at least the first issue?
Yeah, it is a direct follow up to Superman Space Age, even though it takes place on a slightly different universe than Superman Space Age. It's the same basic concept, where it ties into Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this universe is going to, go up in flames eventually. But it's the story as told through Batman's perspective, and he doesn't feel like he has the time to worry about that. He needs to focus on Gotham, because Gotham is what he cares about, and the threats to Gotham are right now. They're not like 20, 30 years down the road. And so it's very much about the importance of cities, and also the importance of saving and helping people around you, not just thinking about humanity in this abstract, like, oh, we should do good things for people in general. But then being an asshole to the barista that you're seeing, standing right in front of you. Like Batman's approach is very much the opposite. It's like, no, just do whatever it takes to help the person in front of you, and then humanity will take care of itself. If everyone's doing this, act like you're in a lifeboat. There's just been like a shipwreck, and you're just trying to pull as many people in the lifeboat as you can. And so it really was sort of like a nice sort of departure from Superman Space Age to write a story about somebody who's got such a starkly different perspective, but yet is doing the same exact thing, like just trying to like save the world from a different direction. And of course, Superman shows up in this, as does Wonder Woman, and most of the Justice League. But it's been an amazing experience to be able to write these books, both Superman and Batman Dark Age, because it allows me to sort of tell these stories the way I would tell them if I could tell them from the beginning, and to really put a lot of myself into these stories. So I'm very lucky to have gotten this opportunity, and extremely lucky to get artwork from the Allreds on it. I mean, that's just a dream come true. I mean, how many people get that chance? So I think this is going to be really something special, and I couldn't feel better about it. I hope people will check it out.
And I like how you kind of stay true to the Batman mythos, but you kind of put a different spin on the origin and his motivations, which we'll probably see for him, on his journey to becoming Batman.
Yeah, the details of the
Um,
story are very different, but I think the heart of it is the same. Is that this is a guy who's sort of thrust into a position he never really foresaw for himself, and he's going to make the best of it. And it's like that's kind of what heroism is. As we said in Superman Space Age, heroism, is just the act of showing up where you're needed most.
Now, in a perfect world, I would like to, like to see a Wonder Woman, like the Age of Wonder.
That's a great title. Yeah, we are planning to do a Wonder Woman yet. I don't know if it'll be called that, but we are
Mhm.
hopefully, unless this one turns out to not sell any copies, or people just hate it, we will probably do a Wonder Woman to round out the trilogy. And so yeah, hopefully we'll get to do all three.
And again, I like how you kind of plant the different characters in the story in different, and then with the big reveal of the guy who's kind of manipulating the Wayne Foundation is like, okay, I see how he's going to tie this into Crisis now.
Yeah.
Well, it's out. Is Pariah a character the have wanted to work with, or just
No, not really, but
is
he's a great character to sort of tie these stories together, because even though they take place on different universes, Pariah is sort of the one common factor. He's on the Earth in all of these universes. So my approach to him is like in every universe, he's decided to try. It's sort of like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. He's doing something different on that day to try to figure out, well, is this a way to make the curse end? So in Superman Space Age, was trying to warn Superman that this was happening. And in Batman Dark Age, he was like, well, screw it. It's going to happen. So I'm just going to get filthy rich while I'm here.
now the Batman one is only a three issue instead of, or is
It's
it's
six
still it's
issues.
three
It's
six issues, but it's
6 issues of 40 pages each. So
okay.
in the end, it will be the same exact length as Superman Space Age, but it's divided over 6 issues instead of 3.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at because I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, it's only 40 pages,
Yeah,
or
you will get 6 issues of it. So yeah, it's in the end, it'll be the same.
is there a difference between? I mean, obviously there's a difference between writing Superman and Batman, but um, is there kind of a one that, having done working on these two projects, that kind of appeals to you more?
Well, I think the thing that appeals to me is not necessarily Superman or Batman, but just sort of the mythos of the DC characters, the DC universe. And I think that's what really appeals to me is sort of like what provokes somebody to become a hero or a villain, and what, how different people would approach their imminent mortality, which all of us have to approach sooner or later. How do different characters approach that differently?
So, kind of moving on, I know that you're involved with the Northwest Museum cartoon. I'm, I'm,
The
I'm,
Northwest
I'm
Museum
not
of
sure.
Cartoon Arts, yeah.
Right, and
Which is,
they just launched a Kickstarter yesterday, and I'm going to be talking to the director on
oh,
Monday.
great.
But
Talking to Mike Rosen.
yep, so
Fantastic.
but,
Yeah, no,
kind of
it's a
give us
great
a preview.
cause. Yeah, so the Northwest Museum of Comic Arts is a museum we're trying to get off the ground. We don't have a physical space yet, but we have been doing events like educational events for children, and like artist sort of support events to like support local comic artists. But the thing I really like about the concept behind this museum is that when you think of museums, you think of something like the National Gallery, or like like the British Museum or something, where it's just a bunch of exhibits and you just sort of walk through on a field trip and then you leave. And this is not what the Northwest Museum of Comic Arts is. We're going to have like a artist residency in the museum, someone that will actually have a space to do their art, and will you be able to go in and sort of like watch them work or talk to them, or they'll be able to give people art lessons and stuff. And it's more of an interactive sort of community-based museum where we're doing things in the community and trying to promote comic arts, and just the medium of comics in any way we can. So the physical space will just be sort of one part of that, having like a brick and mortar space where people can come in and see artworks by great Pacific Northwest artists, and hopefully eventually artists from around the country, but also sort of like connect with the hobby, either as readers or as artists or as writers, and find some support for people who want to actually make comics. So I highly recommend people go to the Kickstarter and give some money. There's also some amazing rewards. There's some Mike Mignola art. There's some signed Miles Morales scripts by Brian Michael Bendis, and there's just some great rewards on there too. So even if you don't really care about the museum itself, you should go check it out, just because there's some really one of a kind, wonderful things that you can get from the Kickstarter.
Well, do you have time to play 5 questions?
Sure, I can play 5 questions.
Okay. Question number one: how would you, in order from worst to best, rate all the major social networks?
Oh, well, worst right now has got to be Twitter/X, which is a shame because it
Yeah.
used to be my favorite. I mean, I'm not even counting like the sort of the open sewers that are like, say, like Gab, or Truth Social, one of the major ones that people who do not live in bunkers are using. I would say Twitter/X is the worst. Um, and I'm not. I mean, I feel like I'm not a big fan of Threads yet, although I post on it pretty regularly. It just
Mhm.
seems like it's more sort of influencer celebrity culture based, and they seem to interfere with the algorithm the most. So I'm going to rank that second worst. And then I sort of like Instagram and Facebook. They're kind of the same as they've always been, and I enjoy them. But I think my favorite right now is Blue Sky.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a nice alternative, and it seems to be the one that's kind of gaining ground after we had the influx of this will be the Twitter killers.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's especially the comics community is especially active there. So I get to talk to and interact with a lot of creators, both established and new creators on Blue Sky, in a way that I don't think I even was able to do on Twitter. It's much easier to find your community, and it's way less toxic than Twitter has been since for at least a decade.
Okay, question number two. Who would you put on your personal Mount Rushmore of comic book creators?
Well, for me, I think Will Eisner's got to be on there somewhere, just because he's sort of created the medium as an art form. I know that's reductive to say that. There was a lot of people that were back then creating the medium, but I think he resonates with me because he has written some like graphic novels before there was really such a thing that still really resonate. One of my favorite graphic novels of all time is still Dropsy Avenue, which, because maybe it was so new, this idea that you have this sort of continuing comic story, it's just still one of the most daring ones, because it really just tells the story of this location in New York City, from the time of the Dutch settlers arriving to his own story in like the 1930s and 40s, living on Dropsy Avenue, and all the changes the neighborhood went through from the 17th century to the 1970s. And I just found it fascinating. It's still one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. So he'd be on there. Uh, Neil Gaiman would be on there. Geez, gosh, who else would be up on that Mount Rushmore? I think these are all very safe and predictable answers. I'm going to try to come up with somebody who's like a little out of left field. I think one person who probably needs to be on some sort of Mount Rushmore is Linda Barry. I think because her artwork and her storytelling are so personal and so unlike anything else. I don't know if it would be a Mount Rushmore, but I think it'd be more like sort of like having her own. She'd be like the graffiti on the subway cars, and I think that's worth acknowledging.
Yeah, you got one more because there's four.
Oh, I'll say Alan Moore. I'll give you another
Okay.
boringly obvious pick.
Okay. Um, question number three. Desert Island reads five. You can pick five. Five. I will include. I will allow runs, the full runs of things, and or omnibuses or
Oh
anything like
wow,
that. So
wow. Well, if an omnibus, then geez, I'll probably take the collected X-Men, because it's like there's so many of them, and there's some really great stuff in there. I would probably take Breakfast of Champions, just because it's my favorite novel, and I've already read it like probably like 20 times, and I don't see myself getting sick of it. I would take probably the collected Alan Moore Swamp Thing, since we're bending the rules like that. Maybe the the collected Frank Herbert Dune series. If I can have all six books, and I think maybe the Histories of Herodotus,
okay.
which I always just find enormously entertaining.
Question number four. Are there any TV shows or series that you're really into now, maybe binging or going back and watching?
Well, the one I just finished, which I really was impressed by, was Three Body Problem, which it's not a secret. Everyone knows about it. It's big on Netflix, but it's really, I think, the kind of science fiction I hope they make more of, because it's very cerebral and yet deals with like characters in a way that's very personal and human. So it's not just cerebral. It's got this really strong emotional base, but it's really just really smart and thoughtful science fiction. So I hope people do that. Another one I think I want to mention, even though it hasn't been on in a few years, just because I'm hoping they'll do a second season at some point, is Severance, which blew me away when I saw it. Again, sort of smart, sort of social commentary science fiction about, it was a science fiction metaphor about the workplace, and I really hope they make more of it.
Okay. And question five. What are you reading? What's on the top? Either the top of your comic stack or
I
What books on the nightstand?
Speaking of Will Eisner, I just got a copy of like the Spirit, the Collected Spirit
Hmm?
comics from the 1940s. So I've been reading that, and I've also been reading a book about the Blue Fairy. I've been into folklore a lot because I've written a prose book, which will come out sometime in 2025 about the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So I'm starting to read more folklore just to see if there's some sort of follow up project I want to do. So I've been reading that, and also been reading a book of philosophy by James Carse called Finite and Infinite Games, that basically says that all human activity can be divided into finite games where there's a clear objective and a winner and a set of rules, and infinite games in which there are no rules, there's no clear objective other than to keep playing. And our the big most of the problems in life are that we conflate infinite games with finite games. We think a game that's supposed to just be fun and just supposed to keep going has rules and a winner, and so we act like it's a competition and expose ourselves as massive jerks. Or we take finite games, like say like a job interview, or like a working on a book or something, and treat it like an infinite game, like, oh, it's just fun to do and there's no real sort of pressure to accomplish anything. And really, to be successful in life and to to have a meaningful existence, you need to be better at identifying which ones are the finite games and which ones are the infinite games.
Okay. Well, do you have any? I know you have. You're writing a mini series for the Blood Hunt event with Hawkeye, Dagger, and Manwolf. Is that correct?
No, I just wrote the Hawkeye backup story, so it's like,
Okay.
yeah, it's just like gosh, I think 12 pages long. So it's just the backup story in that. But I do,
Okay.
there's a reason my name is on the cover, but that's it. Because I wrote the backup story.
Okay. Oh, is there anything else that you have coming out that you can talk about or you
Now,
want to
there's a couple
mention?
things that haven't been announced yet that I can't really talk about. I am, I, and this is one thing that hasn't been announced yet, but I'm still going to talk about it because I'm just really excited about it and I just want to tease it. But I've recently finished writing my first ever series for Dark Horse, and it's about a silent film comedian set in like mostly in the 1920s, and it is going to reunite me with the art of Mike Fian, who did the artwork for Snagglepuss. So I'll be
Okay.
working with him.
Oh, oh. Well, we'll have to have you back when that comes out.
Yeah, they haven't announced it yet, but when they do, I'll definitely come back.
So, is there anything else you wanted to mention about death ratio or anything else?
Yeah, I feel like it for people who are familiar with my work and have liked, say, maybe Not All Robots, or my sort of science fiction work like Billionaire Island or whatnot. This is probably, if you like that stuff, if you like the Billionaire Island and the Not All Robots, the more sort of satiric science fiction stuff, this is probably right up your alley.
Okay. And you know, kind of seems a little on the nose here, but where can people find you on social media?
Yes, follow my anti-social media screeds on social media. I am on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads, all under the same handle, which is Manrus, Manruss, and look forward to interacting with you there.
Now, I always look forward to reading your comments on every Elon Musk story. So,
They're almost, I think that's why there are so many Elon Musk stories, because they're clickbait, and people like me are like moths drawn to the flame.
all right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us this evening, and best of luck. When does the book comes? When does Death Ratio come out exactly? Do you know
End of
what
May,
in the May?
last
Okay.
last
So,
week, and at least last week in May.
so people have plenty of time to talk to their local comic shops and make sure that they're you know ordered for them, and
Yes, and please
I
do, because a lot of comic shops don't order from other companies other than the big three. So it is an AWA title. So you probably want to talk to your comic book shop and get them to order one for your pull box, because they might not carry on any on the shelves because AWA comic and not like an Image comic.
Well, I definitely think it's a something that everybody should check out, should read, should definitely consider and mull over, and
Thanks.
you know.
Yeah, and I will say that like AWA is like one of the few companies where I will just check out a comic just because they're the ones publishing it. Because I feel like it's an honor to work with them because they do such a good job of just sort of curating their line. And I know that I'm going to be reading probably some edgy kind of fun science fiction / horror if I'm reading an AWA title. So I'm very grateful to be part of their stable of regular contributors.
And like you said, they seem to you know not mind taking chances on kind of
Wackier
different types
titles.
of things. Yeah, different titles, different concepts, and all that. So, well, I want to thank you once again for joining us this evening. And when the Dark Horse thing is announced or comes out, we'll definitely have you come back again. I think after your next visit, you get like a gold, green jacket in your own room or something.
Oh, well, you just sweetened the cup considerably, my friend. I will be back.
Oh, do you have any? Are you doing any cons this year? Have anything scheduled for that?
Yeah, I'm doing San Diego and New York. Although in San Diego I'm not tabling, I'll just be floating around. I'll be mostly like drinking, I think, in San Diego, and then in New York I'll be at the table. And I'm doing a signing in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in May, and I'm also doing Rose City here in Portland in September.
No, very nice. So well, if I don't talk to you before then, I hope to see you at New York. And again, thank you again. Great book. And as always, everybody be good to each other. Read something you enjoy, and check us back. I think we have somebody next week. I'm not sure. Stay tuned. Check us out at the website on our social media feed, which is at Comic Watch or Comic Watch HQ. So, but again, Mark, thank you. I'm just babbling now. So
Okay. Well, you can edit all that out in post.
I know because we're live.
Oh no! Oh no!
All right,
Well,
we'll
thank you, Chad.
catch you later.
All right.